I'm going to start by reading 2 Kings chapter 13 verses 1 to 5. In the 23rd year of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, began to reign over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 17 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. He departed not therefrom. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he delivered them into the hand of Hazael, king of Syria, and into the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, all their days. And Jehoahaz besought the Lord, and the Lord hearkened unto him, for he saw the oppression of Israel, and because the king of Syria oppressed them. And the Lord gave Israel a saviour, so that they went out from under the hand of the Syrians, and the children of Israel dwelt in tents as beforetime. This saviour is Shoshenq I, the Libyan pharaoh of Egypt and founder of the 22nd dynasty. The date that he saved Israel was circa 800 BC, as he reigned from 814 to 798 BC. This was the time that we lost our chariot army. I'm going to come back and explain exactly why I know this saviour is Shoshenq I. However, I must needs explain why it says on this very same wiki page that he ruled over 100 years earlier. All ancient Egyptian chronology hangs upon 4 dates, or 4 pillars as they are often referred to: 664 BC, 925 BC, 1228 BC, and 1550 BC. I will do a video in the future on these pillars. Only one of them is correct, but by far the most egregious is 925 BC. Biblically, 925 BC is a fixed date. We know this is the 5th year of the reign of Rehoboam. I'll just show this in 2 Chronicles chapter 12 and verse 2. And it came to pass that in the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Shoshenq, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem, because they had transgressed against the Lord. So in 925 BC, Shoshenq, pharaoh in Egypt, came up against Rehoboam. I'll just pick up in verse 9. So Shoshenq, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem, and took away the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasure of the king's house he took all. He carried away also the shields of gold which Solomon had made. So it was Shoshenq who stole the riches of Solomon. You may remember in a previous video I used the Canimbre genealogy to show that Ramesses II was contemporary with Solomon. Ramesses was the richest pharaoh in Egypt. It would only make sense that his riches came from the richest man in the world at this time, who was Solomon. I don't want to concentrate on Ramesses in this video. I will, however, use the Canimbre genealogy again to link Shoshenq to Israel's saviour, but we must start with the mistaken identity of Shoshenq. There is no archaeological record that dates Shoshenq I to the 10th century BC. He is literally only placed there because of his misidentification as Shoshenq. However, at the start of the video, I used the Bible to place him 100 years later. Shoshenq and Shoshenq do sound familiar. I just did a video showing the similarities in names between personalities from the Amarna period and the books of Samuel. However, the main difference was that I didn't just match the names. The history, locations, and circumstances matched as well. This is not true of Shoshenq and Shoshenq. We'll start from the beginning. The first person to claim that Shoshenq was Shoshenq was Jean-Francois Champollion in 1828. In the temple of Amun-Re, which was built by Shoshenq I, there is a relief of his military campaign into Canaan. This relief was cut in his 21st year, and I'll let you know who the architect was a bit later. This relief contains 150 toponyms of conquered cities that must be read in a particular order known as Bastrophodon, basically as the ox plows. You can see the number order of how to read the relief in this diagram. This is crucial information as it shows the itinerary of his campaign, so we know the order that he went to each city. Well, Champollion made a mistake. The ring in position 29 of this relief he misread as Judah HaMalak, which he mistook for Judah the Kingdom, and he made the association with Shoshenq, which would allow them to date the relief at the start of the 22nd dynasty to 943 BC. This date is now set in stone. Even though Champollion was wrong, it was only 12 years after that people began to doubt Champollion's interpretation, and in 1888 W. Max Muller gave the correct reading of the inscription of Yad HaMelech, which means hand of the king. But it was too late. They never went back and independently dated the 22nd dynasty, which is crazy when you think about it. Most modern Egyptologists would consider the Bible a collection of allegorical stories, yet 925 BC is set in stone and its origins belong to the Bible. We'll look at other evidence to show that Shoshenq is in the Bible, and that if they choose to have Egyptian high chronology anchored to the Bible date based on Shoshenq's relief, then 800 BC should be that date. Let's go through the evidence. First, let's go back to ring 29. To start with, it's in the wrong location. It couldn't have been Jerusalem, as it was between the ring for Aruna and Megiddo, 67 miles away from Jerusalem. If Shoshenq did attack Jerusalem, then we would expect to find that toponym in between Gibeon and Mahanaim from the second row, but it's not there. Also, none of Rehoboam's fortified towns were on the relief that we can find in 2 Chronicles chapter 11 verses 5. And Rehoboam dwelt in Jerusalem and built cities for the defense in Judah. He built even Bethlehem and Etam and Tekoa and Bethsur and Shoko and Adullam and Gath and Marashah and Ziph and Adoraim and Lachish and Azekah and Zorah and Aijalon and Hebron, which are in Judah and in Benjamin fenced cities. And he fortified the strongholds and put captains in them, and store of victual and of oil and wine. And in every several city he put shields and spears, and made them exceeding strong, having Judah and Benjamin on his side. Shoshenq only campaigned in the northern kingdom, which wouldn't make sense as he was allied with Jeroboam. I'll read 1 Kings chapter 11 and verse 40. Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam, and Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt unto Shoshenq, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. Scholars who cling to the idea that Shoshenq was Shoshenq will say that Jeroboam must have betrayed him in some way, but there is no biblical basis for this assumption. Shoshenq and Shoshenq's campaigns were completely different. Now, to back up my claim that Shoshenq was Israel's saviour, we need to look at what archaeology can tell us about the events in 2 Kings chapter 13 verses 1 to 5. I'll just read it again quickly. In the 23rd year of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, began to reign over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 17 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. He departed not therefrom. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he delivered them into the hand of Hazael the king of Syria, and into the hand of Ben-Hadad the son of Hazael, all their days. And Jehoahaz besought the Lord, and the Lord hearkened unto him, for he saw the oppression of Israel, because the king of Syria oppressed them. And the Lord gave Israel a saviour, so that they went out from under the hand of the Syrians, and the children of Israel dwelt in their tents as beforetime. Now I'll read 2 quotes from Finkelstein and Silverman. Between around 835 and 800 BCE, when the kingdom of Aram Damascus controlled the upper Jordan Valley and significant areas in northern eastern Israel, and devastated major Israelite administrative centers in the fertile Jezreel Valley as well. The violent destruction of those sites, long ascribed to the Egyptian raid led by Pharaoh Shoshenq in the late 10th century BCE, took place around 835 at the time of Hazael. so they correctly understand that Shoshenq campaigned in the same devastated cities, but due to the error in the timeline, they misunderstand that it was Shoshenq that saved Israel from Hazael and Ben-Hadad. I'll now finish this video by using external evidence that shows Shoshenq belonged to the 9th century BC and not the 10th century BC, which has never been independently proven and solely relies on the misidentification with Shoshenq. Let's start with the Kenimbre genealogy again. At Wadi Hammamat, in the Shish quarries, we have the royal architect Kenimbre, who lists his genealogy going back 22 generations. This inscription is dated to the 26th year of Darius, which we know is 496 BC. Just as before, we are going to give an approximate age of 21 years per generation. This time we want to go back 14 generations to Haramseth, which would bring us back to 790 BC. Earlier I said I would mention who the architect of Shoshenq's relief was. It was Haramseth. We know this because located at Gebel el Silsila in the sandstone quarries, we have the Stela 100, dedicated to the king who constructed the Shoshenq gateway at Karnak. And sure enough, this stele lists both Shoshenq and Haramseth. This was dedicated to Shoshenq in his 21st year, which we can now estimate was around 790 BC, showing that he ruled in Egypt at the time Israel was sent a saviour. Our next independent means of dating Shoshenq comes from Byblos, where we find 3 Phoenician inscriptions. The first was on the statue of Ozorkon I. On his chest was a dedication text that reads, "Statue of Elibal, king of Byblos, son of Yehimilk, king of Byblos, made for Baalat Gebel, his lady. May Baalat Gebel prolong the days of Elibal and his years over Byblos." Elibal was a contemporary of Ozorkon I, the son of Shoshenq I, who sent a similar statue to Lebanon during the reign of Abibaal, the father of Yehimelech. We can date when these kings ruled in Byblos because of a third inscription found on a limestone slab that reads, "Wall built by Shepitbal, king of Byblos, son of Elibal, king of Byblos, for Baalat Gebel, his lady. May Baalat Gebel prolong the days of Shepitbal and his years over Byblos." This lets us know that Shepitbal was the son of Elibal, but more importantly, Shepitbal can be independently dated by the annals of Tiglath-Pileser III, securely dated to 738 BC, and that reads, "I, Tiglath-Pileser, received the tribute of Kushtashbi of Kumar, Urik of Ke, Sibitbael of Byblos, Enil of Hamath, Panamu of Samal, Matanbael of Arvad, Sanipu of Bit Ammon, Salmanu of Moab, Mitinti of Ashkelon, Jehoahaz of Judah, Kaushamalaka of Edom." As a side note, let me just note that Jehoahaz is not the Judite king that ruled in 603 BC. This is Ahaz, who ruled from 741 to 725 BC, showing once again the use of a shortened version of someone's name being used in the Bible. The full name of Ahaz was Jehoahaz. An earlier tribute mentions tribute sent from Azriahu of Judah. If you remember that the final U in a name most likely is a placeholder for a god, we understand that it will be in reference to Azariah of Judah, who ruled from 790 to 738 BC. This same passage mentions Menahem of Samaria, which is Israel, and he reigned from 752 to 743 BC, confirming the synchronization between the Assyrian king in relation to the dynastic lines of Israel and Judah. I'll just read a passage Tiglath-Pileser wrote about Menahem. "As for Menahem, terror overwhelmed him like a bird. Alone he fled and submitted to me. To his place I brought him back and there's text missing, and it continues, silver, colored woolen garments, Linen garments, the text is missing. It says great, text missing again, and it said I received as his tribute. Even though the text is missing here, we actually have a record of just how much silver was sent when we read 2 Kings chapter 15 verses 19 and 20. And Pul, the king of Assyria, this is talking about Tiglath-Pileser, that's his nickname, came against the land, and Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, that his hand might be with him to confirm the kingdom into his hand. And Menahem exacted the money of Israel, even all of the mighty men of wealth, of each man 50 shekels of silver, to give to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria turned back and stayed not there in the land. But getting back to the annals, this circa 738 BC Shepit is normally assigned with a 2 after his name, because with conventional dating he couldn't possibly be the son of Elibal, who was contemporary with Azorkon. However, we know that this early date for Azorkon is based on the 925 BC pillar, which have proved to be unreliable. So if we recognize that Shepit 1 and 2 are actually the same person, then we can establish guideline dates for Azorkon and Shoshenq using the genealogy of the Byblos inscriptions. This would now place the first 2 rulers of the 22nd dynasty in the late 9th, early 8th century BC and not in the 10th century BC. I'll also add that Ronald Wallenfels feels the inscriptions at Byblos were incorrectly dated to the 10th century BC and felt that they were from the 8th century BC instead. So that's 2 independent means of dating Shoshenq I that place him in the time period that Israel would need a saviour, and we have archaeological proof that he campaigned in the towns that were attacked by Hazael and Ben-Hadad. I do have 2 more ways to date Shoshenq to 800 BC, but I feel that this video was enough to show how damaging the date of 925 BC is for Egyptian chronology, one of the 4 dates that all Egyptian chronology hangs on. So next, I'll look at those 4 dates in more detail to show just how weak these pillars of Egyptian history are. All praises to the Most High.